Hello, my name is Lisa Elvin Staltari, and this is my channel. At Roots Will Travel. I am a genealogist and a passionate traveler. Over the last year, we have been exploring les filles du roi, the founding mothers of Quebec and indeed North America. Um, Channel, I have lots of other videos that I plan on doing, but right now I'm really focusing on les filles du roi. Coming up in January, I'm hoping to start les filles à Bernier, so we will hopefully see that soon. Um, I do want to point out some of the icons that I've added to my front page. We have the subscribe button, which I'd love for you to do if that's something you're interested in. Click on the like, that helps out to share the channel. And of course, the notifications will give you the ability to get notified when I post new content. The three new icons represent Ko-fi. I belong to the Ko-fi club now, coffee club. And apparently, if you click on it and you want to give me, buy me a cup of coffee, then you can do that. It's kind of cool. So it's like a one-time donation sort of thing. And then we have Etsy, where I have done 2 digital downloads that you can have a look at involving Les Filles du Roi. I hope to have more. And then the big one, Patreon, is a way of supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Have a look at that, different levels and things like that. So I'm really excited to partner up with Patreon. So with that being said, let's get started and find out who is our fille du roi of this episode. So this week's fille du roi, her name is Francoise Zachee. Now, regular viewers know that I usually take my inspiration from their suggestions or my own files. This one was simply taken because she was actually on an alphabetical list of filles du roi. I saw her, she was the last one, and I thought, interesting name. And I began exploring her life, and I could not resist researching her. So I'm really glad I did. Sometimes the paths that you take lead you into really interesting places. So with that being said, please let me know if you're related to Francoise, because I find her fascinating. So we want to explore Francoise's life and see where her road took her. Francoise would have been born in 1655 in Paris, France. Her parents were François Zachee and Claude Milot. She would have been baptized in the famous church of Saint Bartholomew, in other words, which is now currently located. It is located on the site of the current commercial court, the Boulevard du Palais. It no longer exists. Well, let's talk a little bit about this amazing place. From the end of the 5th century, on the Ile de la Cité, there was a chapel dedicated to Saint Bartholomew. So that's how old the church that she would have been baptized and her parish is from. It was frequented by kings and by the counts of Paris, whose palace was nearby. In 890, Count Eudes made it a collegiate church, to which Hugues Capet, then the Count of Paris, entrusted the remains of Saint Magloire around 965. So this is the foundation of the Abbey of Saint Barthélemy, which was founded in 980. By 1183, the monks moved it to the right bank. The church of their abbey then became a parish church under the sole name of Saint Barthélemy. So the history of this amazing place is really the history of Paris and of France. I just want to indicate, that the fact of the matter is that until I had really explored this avenue, I did not realize that inside of Paris, there is an island, and it is the Ile de la Cité, and this is where she would have been baptized. I don't know if she was living at Ile de la Cité, but there's actually an island found in Paris. So inside the city is a small patch of land, and that is where this particular church is from. This is a painting of the destruction of the church in 1791, after the revolution. This is kind of how you can see, the bridges on the bottom here. You can see that the bridges link on the right bank, the left bank, that sort of thing. So really amazing, amazing history if this is your uh, ancestry. Upon her father's death, at about age 15, she embarked on the greatest adventure of her life. The ship that would take her there was La Nouvelle France, and she arrived in Quebec City on July 31st, 1670. So the groom that she selected and who selected her, his name was Claude de Saint, and he was born in 1646 in a town called Blois in France. His father was Etienne de Saint and Madeleine, and his mother, Madeleine Berquier. Now, Claude was born in that commune. Remember, commune, it means township of Blois. It is now found in the region of Centre Val de Loire, which I've located right there in the second map. The first on your left is the département of Loire et Cher, and Blois is actually the capital of this department. You can actually see where Blois is. Currently, there are about 45,000 inhabitants. Here's a very brief history of this place. It was originally the capital of the county of Blois, which was created in 832 until it became part of France in 1498 when Count Louis II of Orleans became King Louis VII of France. Blois would then would be the official residence of the kings of France from the 15th to the 17th century. And this is a picture of one of the residences. And then we have a picture of just what it looks like now on the river bank. So just really, really charming place. He comes from very historic, as you know, as Francoise came as well. So let's have a look at their life. So about the 27th of April, 1671, so about, a little less than a year. So it was remember she was 15, so that's partly why perhaps it was a little bit longer for her to, make that contract. But as of April 1671, she and Claude were married. And here we find that Francoise and Claude would settle down in Quebec City. Let's review a little bit about this amazing place where they would begin their lives. It's the capital today. It's the capital, always has been actually, of the province of Quebec. 500,000 people live directly in Quebec City. Quebec was originally named by the Algonquins who named the area Quebec, K-E-B-E-C, which in their native language meant where the river narrows. Quebec City lies where the St. Lawrence River narrows. Samuel de Champlain founded a French settlement here in 1608 and called it Ville de Québec, or Quebec City. The city walls which surround it still date back to this time period, making Quebec City the only city with remaining city walls in North America, north of Mexico. And there's so much to see in Quebec City, but I've chosen to just kind of demonstrate one of the oldest buildings. I'm fascinated by it. It's called Maison Jacquette, and this house is the oldest surviving private residence in Quebec. It dates from 1675, and if you'd like to tour it, it is home to a famous restaurant appropriately called Aux Anciens Canadiens, which roughly translated means to our old Canadians or to our historic Canadians. We have here on the left just a kind of shopping center, they call it, and it is the cobblestone streets and all of that that is part of the charm of Quebec City. It really reminds me of Boston, which was built a little bit later, but still in that same essential time period. In the middle of your screen, we have, a depiction of Quebec City as it would have existed at that time. It says 1700. Pretty close. And then we have just a map. I wanted to show you where Quebec, where the river narrows. It really shows you that. Now, in the 1681 census, we have Claude, who is listed as a coutelier, which is a knife maker. So that was his profession. Françoise is there, his children, Louise and Claude, and his brother is living with him. It says that he's an arquebusier, which I believe means that he makes guns, but I could be wrong. Then he has two guns. There are two guns in his home. So that is where we find them in 1681. So Louise married Bertrand Arnault and had 4 children, all of whom made it to adulthood. Claude would marry Charles. Remember that Claude can be a girl's name, and it is indeed here. Married Charles Monsignat and had 4 children, all of whom made it. So those are the two, descendant children of Claude and Francoise. So interesting to know if that is your ancestry. And we do not have a death record for Claude, but we know that he would pass between 1682 and 1684. We don't know where he's buried or the cause of his death. But in true New France fashion, one man would pass and another would arrive. So her next husband would be Antoine Gourdeau, and he's born in 1655 in Quebec City. So he's a native of New France. His parents were Jacques Gourdeau and Eleanor de Grandmaison. I am at one point going to do an entire series, not a series, but an episode on Eleanor, because she is just amazing. Don't want to go too much into her, because it's about Francoise, not Eleanor, but Eleanor deserves her own place. Now, Antoine was a merchant. He was a controller for the reception of beaver pelts at Quebec. He was a lieutenant in the colonial company of the Quebec Regiment, in La Barre's company, which is part of the militia. So this is just, this is who he was. They got married on December 1st, 1685. So how did they build their life? Well, they didn't, because there were no children produced, but he drowned in the wreck of the Saint-François Xavier, I have been trying to find information on it. So if anyone has information about this is all, apparently it was a fairly, large, disaster, if you will, in November of 1691. So this is her second husband, Francoise. Then, she's okay. What am I going to do now? Well, Francoise does marry again, but it takes her 10 years. Remember, she would have had to have financial, some financial stability based on the 2 men that she had married prior to this time. And so by 1701, she's ready to get married again. Her third husband is René Louis Chartier, Sœur de Louvignières. So again, sœur means sir. He was born in 1643 in Paris, in the district or the parish of Saint-Nicolas-des-Champs. His parents were Louis d'Arles Chartier de Louvignières and Marie-Elisabeth Daillard. So the Catholic parish church of Saint-Nicolas-des-Champs was built in the 15th century. It's located at Rue Saint-Martin in the 3rd arrondissement of Paris. The current church was built between 1420 and 1480 and enlarged in the 16th and early 17th century. So it actually kind of really looks the way it probably looked when René was, born in this part of Paris. And the 3rd arrondissement is founded on the right bank of the River Seine. It's referred to as Temple or Templar. This sector dates back to the Middle Ages, and it's the second smallest of Paris's sections or arrondissements. And among the notable facts about this arrondissement of Paris, is that it's here where you can find the oldest surviving private house in Paris, built in 1407. Imagine, that house stood there when René was a small child. I love to think of that. And I have to one day see this house. There's also an ancient Jewish quartier or section, which dates back from the 13th century, and it's an important part of the Jewish history of Paris. So Francoise would become stepmother to 6 of the children that René had with Marie-Madeleine Lambert, and they would be married May 16th, 1701. Just wanted to give you an idea. When I read about René Chartier, I was like, This is not just nobody, right? So let me show you his pedigree. So Renee's resume, as I call it, this is the actual street that they lived on. I found it. So this is the street where they, you know, resided with his children. I think her children had already married by then. Um, but he was the Sire de Loubignan. He was Lieutenant General for the Civil and Criminal. He was the presiding judge. He was a counselor for the Conseil Souverain. And he was co-director of the Compagnie du Nord and Compagnie de l'Économie. He was chief counselor of the Conseil Supérieur. Needless to say, he was an important man in Quebec City. So Rene would pass away on June 3rd, 1709. And he and Francoise would have been married, a mere 8 years. He was 66 years old. Francoise would pass away 9 years later and would pass away on October 23rd, 1718, at the age of 63. And the legacy of the Chartiers, which of course Francoise would have been part of, you may want to have a look at the Chartier Family Association, just to kind of glean, even though she did not have any children, she was part of his life. So there could be further information for you to gather. I've included the web address as well. Here are my top 6 resources: La Société des Filles du Roi, Quebec Genealogical E-Society, Nos Origines, Généalogie Québec, Migration, and the Facebook Filles du Roi Descendants. I've included the list for you for further research. And with that, we end episode 133. I am simply fascinated by Francoise. She and Claude would only end up having 25 descendants in 1729. I'm fascinated to know how strong that line became, or if there's anyone related. And I'm sure there are, but you never know. Just her story is one of survival, is one of constantly reinventing herself, of coming to New France and building a life, not with one gentleman, but with 3. And she was able to also claim that, live on her own for 10 years. So she was not, someone who was dependent on others. She absolutely was a strong and courageous founding mother. And for that, we thank her, we admire her, and we are so grateful that she came to our shores. And with that, I thank you, and we will see you on episode 134. Until then, au revoir.